All right, let's get started. So my name is Celeste May Swango. I'm the State Director with Environment Oregon and Environment Oregon Research and Policy Center. And I'm really excited about today's webinar, Charging Ahead, everything you need to know about getting an electric car. I want to extend a really big thank you to our co-hosts, Fourth, Oregon Environmental Council, and Osberg Foundation. So here's the agenda for today's webinar. So I'm going to start with just a big picture overview on why electrifying our transportation system is so important. Then I'll hand things over to J.R. Anderson and Pramod Jacob from Fourth, who are going to share some tips on finding the right car for you and more about the process of purchasing an EV, and talk a little bit about the incentives available, who qualifies and how to get them. And then we'll have electric car owners. My friends Jana and John are here to answer questions about their experience buying and owning electric cars. So at any time throughout the presentation, please feel free to ask questions using the Q&A function on Zoom, and we'll try to get your questions answered as we move through the program here. All right, so why get an electric car? So first and foremost, a greener, healthier world requires each of us to do all that we can to eliminate the pollution and practices that are warming the planet and changing our climate. So transportation is America and Oregon's #1 source of global warming pollution, with greenhouse gas emissions from cars, trucks, buses, and other vehicles surpassing every other source. We simply cannot solve global warming without changing how we get around. Additionally, traffic-related air pollution kills an estimated 58,000 Americans every year and increases the risk of serious health conditions, including lung cancer, stroke, heart disease, asthma, and even dementia. So we need to move away from polluting fossil fuels. And of course, getting more people moving by foot, bike, and transit is a really critical way that we can immediately reduce both global warming pollution and pollution from tailpipes. And we should do whatever we can to get out of our cars. But the reality is our transportation system is built for cars. And so another key tool that we have to reduce climate pollution and clean up our air is to electrify our transportation system. So based on our current electricity mix, the average electric vehicle produces just 1/3 of the pollution that a gas-powered car does. And that's only going to get cleaner as we transition our electric grid to renewable energy. Last year, the Oregon legislature passed and the governor signed a bill that will commit our state to getting 100% of our electricity from clean sources by 2040. So our electric grid is just going to get cleaner and cleaner as time moves on. And in addition to being less polluting, electric vehicles are also more efficient with the power that they produce, hovering around 90% efficiency, compared to the internal combustion engine's 35% efficiency. Electric cars also have zero tailpipe emissions, so they provide an immediate benefit to air quality. I think a lot of people think, that electric vehicles are outside of the budget of the typical consumer, but there are affordable options already on the market and more on the way. And there are a lot of incentives available to Oregonians that can lower the sticker price of electric cars even more. And our friends from Fourth are going to go through those incentives in just a bit. So as the result of low fuel and maintenance costs, electric vehicles are also typically cheaper to own than conventional vehicles over the vehicle's lifetime. Electric vehicles have fewer parts since they don't have an engine, which makes them easier and cheaper to maintain. And again, because they're so efficient, that can also lead to further savings. Electricity costs and the cost of charging vary, but the Department of Energy has found that it costs about half as much to fuel an electric vehicle as a gas-powered car. And those estimations came out before this latest surge in gas prices. And then another reason to get an electric car that's not on this list is that they are very, very fun to drive. So I wanted to give just a quick snapshot look at kind of electric cars and infrastructure in Oregon. So according to the state of Oregon, as of January of this year, there are 47,390 electric cars on the road, and that number is rising every day. So for electric vehicles to really become mainstream, they need to be easy to charge. I think people correctly notice that there are not nearly as many electric vehicle chargers as there are gas stations, but more and more charging stations are being installed across the state as we speak. So as of March of this year, there are 2,118 public chargers in over 900 locations from 7 different charging networks. Because of the access of charging stations and the incentives available to Oregon consumers, Plug-in America has ranked Oregon 3rd among US state policies and programs that support drivers of zero-emission vehicles. So Oregon is a great place to own an electric car. And then thanks to the bipartisan infrastructure law that passed Congress last year, America is investing $7.5 billion to build a national network of electric vehicle charging stations, which will make it a lot easier to find a place to charge in the years to come. And Oregon is receiving $52 million over the next 5 years for charging infrastructure in Oregon. And that's going to go towards a commitment made by the Oregon Department of Transportation to invest $100 million to build out charging infrastructure across the state over the next several years. So this is all to say Oregon is on our way to electrifying our transportation system, but it is going to take a lot more Oregonians turning in their gas guzzlers and going electric if we're going to reduce our climate pollution and have cleaner air across our state. So with that, I'm going to turn things over to JR and Preowned to talk to us about purchasing an electric car.
Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. Thanks for the introduction, Celeste. Pramod and I are going to kind of go back and forth and go through our different panels together, just because some of these things overlap. So I decided to come on today to share with you how to find the right electric car, how to find the right car, and to give you some tips toward that. And some of that has to do with charging and where you live and other things that you would keep in mind when you're looking for any vehicle, any way to provide transportation for yourself and your family. So obviously the first thing you want to think about is how much can you afford. If you have cash, obviously go that route, save on the interest. But you want to think about your budget first. I recently had an experience where due to the rising gas prices, I drove an old Lexus SUV, and I think I filled my car up, I don't know, maybe a month and a half ago, and it was like 3 digits. And I said, go ahead, I'm done, that's enough. And so I actually went on this process myself. It took me about 2 weeks to find a vehicle that I liked. And I did a number of test drives and everything else, just like you would with any other car. The difference today is that, if you want to buy a pre-owned car, for instance, there's a lot of different options to find these particular vehicles. And it's actually probably more indicative of what the future is going to look like. So if you go on to certain websites, for instance, Carvana, you may have seen ads for Carvana, where they call it like the automatic vending machine for cars. You find the car and basically pay for it. They ship it to these giant booths that they put in different cities. And then you go, once you have the payment made, you can actually retrieve the car yourself. So I haven't actually done that. I went a little bit more old school route, but I did buy my car online. I did not see my car. I had driven one before. And, that process was very similar than that I've had many, many times buying gas vehicles. So, there's a lot of incentives right now to buy electric cars. You have a lot of tax rebates. There's state incentives, and we'll go into all these things a little bit more as we go on. But just wanted to give you an outline of those things. So budget is one thing. You want to figure out how you want to afford it. Like I said, if you're going to pay cash, you're going to get a loan. You can do credit union, just like with any other car. You can, if you buy through a dealer, you can go through the dealer financing. I actually did that just because their rates were better. So I just went that route. And, and then today, I think the tough part is if you buy out of state, you have to pay a little bit more for shipping, possibly, to get the vehicle to you, because typically, right, these days, these vehicles are typically shipped by diesel trucks and the gas is expensive. So they transfer that cost onto you. So to go in further, charging is very important when you decide about these vehicles, and it depends on your lifestyle. Depending on where you live. If you have a private home, that's the easiest situation. If you live in a multifamily apartment, for now is still probably the most challenging. And then obviously figuring out what your family needs are to help you decide what kind of vehicle you're going to get. If you get Pramod, can you go to the next?
Yeah, sure. I was going to say we can sort of introduce Forth first. I was going to say we can go through the presentation. I can uncover this slide really quickly. So JR and I work for Forth. We're based in Portland. We're a nonprofit trade association, and we advocate for electric, shared, and smart mobility. And these are our four main focus areas. And as you can see, we work in a lot of different areas of the industry. But for example, our policy team has helped pass the incentives that are available in Oregon today. And we were at the process, our team was there helping that get through the legislature. And JR and I are in demonstration projects and consumer engagements. So we do, I work on different projects that regarding electric mobility. And then we also do stuff like this with webinars and in-person events. To get into the type of electric vehicles, JR, did you want to do this?
Yeah, sure. So yeah, the types of electric vehicles that are available today, you have plug-in hybrid electric vehicles, which you see here on the left. Basically, this is a true hybrid where it allows you to separate the gas from the electric mode of transportation. So you may know about the Toyota Prius, the original Toyota Prius. So I wouldn't really call that a true hybrid, but they do have plug-in Priuses as well. And Prius has been a big leader in those sales. So the plug-in hybrid allows you to plug in your car and it'll give you a minimal range of pure electric driving. For instance, you may get anywhere from 20 to say 40 miles range on electric, which for most people that's sufficient. And then the next one is battery electric vehicle, BEV, which is what I purchased. I bought a BMW i3. It's not on this list, but BMW i3. BMW i3 also has a range extended, so it's kind of similar to a plug-in electric, but a little bit different. So the battery electric vehicle is pure electric. You plug in, you have your range, you get a lot of information from these vehicles. They tell you everything. It's a lot more, it supplies a lot more information than you would get in a gas vehicle. So in a gas vehicle, you have your gas gauge, and then you basically fill up when it gets low or whenever you need to fill it up. In an electric vehicle, your gauge will change as you drive, depending on your driving techniques and whether you have your heat on, whether it's raining, et cetera, et cetera. So at first it can be a little daunting to see all that stuff, but it's actually pretty nice to have all that information to know exactly how you are, because it's happening in a gas vehicle as well. So these are the two here. So plug-in hybrid, battery electric vehicles.
And I actually wanted to point out something interesting I saw a few days ago. It was a advertisement, and I wanted to pull it up and show you that this is sort of the way that the industry is posturing itself when it comes to these two options. And yeah, but I just thought it would be cool to go through this. Let's see.
Such a great ad.
Yeah, so I think this was made last fall, but I saw on Peacock, that streaming app, about 2 days ago. And So here we go. It's for the Hyundai Tucson plug-in hybrid. So this vehicle takes gas, and this is what they say.
So you got yourself an EV.
Well, it's a plug-in hybrid.
Plug-in hybrid what?
EV?
Yeah, it is. Did you use gas today?
No, but I can if I need to.
So
I got myself an EV.
evolve your journey in the first ever Tucson.
So that's an interesting way of looking at it, in my opinion. Yes, that person didn't need gas that day, but that's because they might have driven like 5 or 10 miles and it was just like a pretty low-key day for them. But if they had to drive any considerable distance and were running AC or heat and, like going anywhere further than out of town, they would need to get gas. And then with a plug-in hybrid, there are also oil changes and spark plugs and all the moving parts that are still existing there. So that's a really important thing to consider, where it's like that ad or like someone at the dealership might try and sell you that car in the way of like, oh, it's an EV, which it's not quite true. Like there's an electric mode that is, for certain like plug-in hybrids, like the electric mode only activates when you're under a certain miles per hour. And then after you go about a certain speed, the engine kicks in and you're burning gas. So if you're really looking for a driving experience where you separate yourself from the gas pump and you're not reliant on fossil fuels, that's not the way. It may still work for you if you do need a vehicle that, like, they have some really good benefits, like that RAV4 that's in this picture. I think like when you fill up the gas all the way and you plug in the battery all the way, it gets you like 600 miles of range. And that sounds great. And if that works for you, that's great. But the thing is, like, there is a gas tank, and that's something that if you're trying to like really remove yourself from like going to the pump and paying $5-6 a gallon, this car is not the solution for you. That's where an electric, like a fully electric vehicle is what you're looking for. So going back into charging, which Jared was talking about, there's level 1 charging. So level 1 refers to the fact that it plugs into a 120 volt outlet, just a normal outlet on the wall. You gain about 3 to 5 miles of range per hour when you're charging, and it's good for overnight charging. So these chargers are good for older cars, like the older Nissan Leafs or Bolts that say about 100 to 120 miles or even less range, that people just use as their sort of short commute cars. So if they're just going to work and it's like a 2-mile commute to work and then like another mile to the grocery store, you don't really need a high range electric vehicle, say, that has like 200 plus miles of range. Like an 80 to 90 mile Nissan Leaf might do the job for you.
Right.
And I have something, I can quickly point out, like I've talked to Platt Auto. They're a used car dealership, electric car dealership. They sell only EVs and plug-in hybrids. Their salesman interestingly told me that in Portland, their best seller in the pandemic are these older Leafs and Bolts, like not the new $50,000-$60,000 EVs, but the ones that are used that cost probably like $15,000 to $30,000. That, yes, they don't have like a bunch of range, but if you're only doing your Portland driving, it works really well, or wherever you live. I'm just using that as my example because that's where I'm here. Like during my normal week, if I'm not going out of town, that car does everything I need, and a level 1 charger at home charges it up fine. And overnight, you gain back considerable range, and you're good to go.
Yeah. If I may, I have with my car, the car that I purchased, I use a level 1 charger at home. I pretty much top off every night, just because the range is lower, and I'm doing a lot of back and forth driving, and we're also in Portland is also very hilly, so that's another thing to keep in mind. I actually will gain miles when I go downhill, and then as I come uphill, you will lose those miles. So it just depends on what you need, but there's a lot of different ways to look at it. The level 1 is definitely a great and cheap way to charge your car every night. You probably won't even see a difference in your electric bill. It might be like a couple cents, maybe $1 or $2, and that's it. So you won't even notice it. If you come home, it takes about 5 seconds. You plug it in, and you just go to sleep. And you wake up in the morning, you unplug it, and you leave. Did that this morning. It's a very liberating feeling.
And level 2 is another option that you can have at your home. And level 2 is also what's used pretty commonly in the public and like workplace charging. And most chargers that you see of this size, like right here on the left, Those will be considered level 2 chargers. So this, you get it from a 240 volt plug. So that's the plug that you would use if you're installing one of these at home. And
Like a dryer
that's,
outlet.
yeah, the dryer outlet, I think like hot tubs plug into the same thing. So you can have, there's a few different applications at home. So where you can have an electrician come out and install a model like you see, like a wall unit right here, and that's hardwired to your panel. Or you can get one of these plugs installed and then just have like a, like for example, this cord, it would look like this, except right here, instead of it being a 120 volt, it's a 240 volt. And you can just sort of plug it in like a phone charger almost, and it's not a built-in wall unit. But there is a advantage to the built-in wall unit through the incentives that are offered through PGE and Pacific Power here in Oregon. So as far as I know, with both of them, it's $500 if you have bought or leased an EV. You can apply for it, and then they both have a list of qualifying chargers. And the beauty of these chargers is that you get the incentive for them, and then they also are eligible to be participants in the utilities time of use programs. So with that, they're able to monitor your charging and adjust it at times where the grid needs more electricity. So for example, at nighttime, if your car is plugged in, they will let the car charge up faster because there's less demand for electricity around the grid. So on both of their websites, it's pretty easy to find their pages for the incentives. And then $1,000, if you are income qualifying, you can get up to $1,000. And this $1,000 can cover 500 or 1,000, can cover equipment costs, installation costs, and anything else associated with it. And I know that for PGE, you get $25 a month, or not a month, but for each like billing cycle, you get $25 a month for being enrolled in that smart use. They call it the smart use program. And then I'm pretty sure
to allow them to monitor your usage.
Right. And then I'm pretty sure that they even have another program for Teslas. This is PGE, that if you get a Tesla, they will monitor like the Tesla itself, and then they'll pay you an additional incentive or like a rebate to be a part of that program. But yeah, I would check out their websites. And with Pacific Power, you can apply up to 6 months after you've installed the chargers. So it can be something that can be done retroactively.
Great. Thank you. And yeah, I mean, can you go back one slide to the 220? So the 240 volt outlet, my wife and I, we both now have EVs, and we installed one of these in our garage for her charging. She has a bigger battery pack. So she probably charges once or twice a week. Whereas my car has a smaller battery pack, and my level 1 charger is sufficient for me. And if I go on a long trip, I either charge it early overnight, or I can use the level 3 chargers, which would be the next one. We'll talk about that. And Pramod, you can talk about this. I know you have a lot of experience with the DC fast charging, which is available in the public, which is good for longer trips.
Yeah, for sure. So this is level 3 charging. There's a lot of names thrown around, and people will call it like, so Tesla will brand theirs as supercharger. So Tesla will constantly say Tesla superchargers. By that, they mean a level 3 Tesla charger. People will call it fast chargers. People will just throw around the term superchargers, referring to a non-Tesla charger. It all just refers to this class of chargers called level 3 that is really focused around you getting these 20 to 40 minute charge times. You can pull in basically at any battery state. You know, even like I pulled into a level 3 with like 5% battery, and I'm out in like 50 minutes with a full battery. So this is the type of like infrastructure that you can't have at your home. All that's just a lot of electricity that I'm pretty sure like with a group of these like level 3s, it's enough electricity to power a small factory. Like there's a lot of power when a bunch of cars are plugged in.
Very expensive.
With Tesla, they have their own proprietary network that only Teslas can plug into, but the JR knows a little bit more about how they're planning to open up that network to other cars, and he'll go over that in a second. Yep. So then most fast chargers will have this CCS. So if it's a non-Tesla car, it will use this CCS fast charging. So people will call this, I usually just call this a CCS plug. And then this Chatamo is exclusively like a Nissan Leaf plug. I've seen some other cars like the Kia Soul EV, they used to make it, they don't make it anymore. That used to use Chatamo, but this is something where like the industry is really shaping towards getting rid of this. There
Mhm.
are strong advocates in terms of keeping it, mainly like the old, like it's actually right here, this white car is one of those older Leafs I'm talking about. A lot of owners of these cars still want this option because there's a considerable population that uses these cars. So that's an interesting sort of development in terms of like, will it stay or will it not? But there are a lot of chargers around that have it. And then this is the most common one. So again, the biggest benefit here is that you pull into a charger and you're out by 30 minutes. So with going on trips, you plan it around your lunch stops, bathroom breaks. So it's all about the convenience of supercharging. I just said another thing. So level 3. So the lingo can get kind of scattered, but it all sort of is all sorts of means the same thing. JR, do you have anything to add about this?
Yeah, and you know, the nation, the United States is actually working to minimize these options. I think it's just because EVs are still relatively new that these things have happened. You know, you have these 3 different types of chargers, and the CCS is basically a level 2 with these extra 2 panels on the bottom, which allows it to inject more electricity into your vehicle. You can see the top of this here, and then it just adds that bottom piece on there. So, so just depending on if you have a level 2 or level 3, but there are efforts to make this more simple for drivers to use around the country, and it will happen at some point. You know, it will definitely happen at some point. So
I think a good way to sort of put this into an analogy is like with phones back when like the first iPhone was coming out. It's almost like people in the EV world will call like Teslas or the iPhone, and then ECS is the Androids, and then Chatamo is like a Nokia phone that a ton of people still love, and Nokias are really reliable, but they have their own charging port. And you know, it's like people have the argument that like, oh, nobody uses Nokias anymore, but then some still do. So in the sort of timeline of it being a disruptive technology of trying to disrupt gas, like it goes through these phases where things are just not as simple as they should be. But like JR said, as the industry evolves and this becomes more common, people will try and make this as simple as possible so that you can pull into any charging station and plug in without having to worry about what shape or size or whatever. Like it should be that easy. So I think that's the sort of end goal. And Celeste, can I get a time check on how much time we have left, just to make sure I don't.
I think we're 2
I
minutes
think
left.
we want to leave some time for questions. So just a couple more minutes.
Sounds good. Yeah, I'll try and go through here. So yeah, so the next part is the incentives. So with a federal tax credit, that's the big one. You can get up to $7,500 off the purchase or lease of a new EV. And the URL, so we'll send this presentation out to everyone. And this link here will show the EVs that are eligible. And I think plug-in I know that plug-in hybrids are also included in this. And right here, yeah, Chevy and Tesla are the only brands not eligible. So the government has set up the guideline that like if your brand sells over 200,000 units in the United States, then your brand isn't eligible for the federal tax credit anymore. So this is done the year, like the tax season after you buy your EV, like following. So you have to have liability. I'm not a tax expert, so I haven't bought an EV myself, so I don't really know how this works, but there are plenty of people that do, and I'm sure the dealerships, if you go to a good dealership, they should know as well. And I'm sure this website will also have everything. So, but yeah, from what I know, like I've known plenty of people who have taken advantage of this, and it's a pretty straightforward process. And then in Oregon, specifically, we have the standard rebate, which is the $2,500 off a new release. Oh, this is also for used, right, JR?
Yeah, well, I think the charge ahead is for new or leads. I think the standard is for new only, but I'm not sure.
Okay, I updated this morning, but I'm not sure.
I think my wife got 2,500 for her Tesla.
Right. So in Oregon, it doesn't matter what brand you're buying. So you can buy a Tesla. What brand. Right. You can buy a Tesla and not get the federal, but still get the Oregon. And then the charge ahead rebate is an income qualifying rebate. that gives you an additional $2,500 off, new, leased, or used. I will clarify and put this in our follow-up email, like what this standard applies to. I want to say that it works for used EVs as well.
Okay. And the
I
charger
won't-
head actually is up to 5,000, I believe.
Okay,
Yeah,
yeah. The charger head is up to
which
5,000.
which was just recently released in the public. So that's really new information. You can get up to 5,000 for off of a new or used EV.
Right. I will send the corrected figures in the follow-up. And yeah, that's fine. We can sort of just move into the next section and take questions at the end. Does that work? Or should we take questions now?
Thank you for your presentation. We do have a couple questions that folks have asked that I think are a little bit more technical. So we won't put that on our EV owner, John. But the Marcia is asking, what's the lifespan of batteries in a new EV?
Good question. It's some of it depends on how the car is maintained, but electric vehicle batteries have been surpassing a lot of their suggested lifespans. I know Tesla is working on I think it was like a 1,000,000-mile battery or something like that. But basically, if you charge it every day and know certain parameters about a battery, you should be able to get a couple 100,000 miles off of your car on a single battery. If you're charging it, keeping it like lithium-ion batteries like to be between 10% and 90%. So they kind of recommend charge it up to 80% every day, unless you're doing a long trip, then you go 100%. If you charge it 100% every day, which is the worst case scenario, you will have more battery degradation, but it's not as bad as you think. There are car livery services that I've heard of in California. That have Model S Tesla, and they supercharged every day, multiple times a day for a number of years, and they got probably 200,000 miles on each battery, and then they had to change it because the range was degraded. But that's every day, so that's like worst case scenario. So for someone that drives like most Americans, you can have that car for a really long time.
That scenario of someone reaching the end of their life on an EV really hasn't happened yet to the average American consumer. In terms of people getting their EVs and adopting the system, it's been probably like 4 years for even like an early adopter, and their EVs are still going strong. And like JR said, there are these extenuating circumstances of where you need to supercharge every day, and it's really not like a comparable situation to like the average consumer. So these questions of like, oh, what happens to an EV when it gets like 5 years old, 10 years old? It's like we're sort of living that scenario now. We don't really have any information or studies to say, like, those studies are being done now, and to see what happens. And but yeah, like JR said, like the technology is getting like better month after month. There's like huge financial incentive for these companies to make the batteries better, to use more readily available materials, and to not go after scarce materials. And if someone can figure out a battery that like just does these things, and there's these batteries coming out where it's like a 2-part battery, and one part of the battery is used for power delivery, and then the other is used for storage. And they're coming up with so much technology that could change the game and really, kickstart another sort of push of EVs. So I wouldn't really worry about the battery longevity. Like, they're built to be charged up and down like thousands and thousands of times over their lifetime. And battery recycling is another really emerging technology where I feel like in 10 years, there's going to be a service where, like, if you have an old EV, you can just drive in, pay a fee, get the batteries swapped out, and you're out in like 2 days. Like, I think that's, I mean, if you have like a lot of money, you could pretty much do that now. And I think it'll be a lot more readily available in the future.
Definitely.
All right, great. There's some confusion around the incentives. So can you go back to that slide, Pramod?
Yes. Okay,
Maybe. Okay. So I guess one of the questions is, so the federal tax credit is up to $7,500 off, depending on the type of vehicle. And as noted here, Chevy and Tesla are not the only brands that are not eligible because they hit their quota.
Yeah,
And
I
then
think some of us
separately,
need that too.
yeah, and the amount of this credit depends on the size of the battery. So it's up to $7,500, but it really does depend on the make and model of the car that you're looking for. And
that
then
is a
there's
tax credit, not a rebate. So that's
tax credit,
yeah.
right? Cool. And then there's the Oregon State Clean Vehicle rebates. So there's the standard rebate, and then there's the charge ahead rebate, which is income qualified. So I guess one of the questions is, can you get both of the Oregon rebates, or can you only get one or the other?
I am pulling up the website right now, just so I can not continue guessing. Okay, here we go. So this is the Clean Vehicle Rebate Program website. So here are the rebate amounts. So you can get the standard rebate. So you can, if you do income qualify, you can get both. So they can be combined for up to $7,500 towards the purchase of a new released eligible or of a new eligible vehicle, and then yes, combined with the federal tax incentive, that is $15,000. So yeah, according to this, you can do that.
So up to $5,000 for a charge ahead applicant after January 1st this year.
Yep.
So this is another $7,500 if you're income qualified. And the income qualification is pretty liberal. I think it's for a family of 4. I want to say it's like, I don't know, $200,000.
No, hold on, JR.
Well, we
I
can
did-
send out a link to this so people can look at the incentives. But let's bring our electric vehicle owners out to answer questions. Hi, Jana. Hi, John. Let me spotlight you guys for a second so everyone can see you. We have some questions for folks about your experience owning, driving, and charging electric cars. My first question, and we can start with you, John, is just why did you decide to get an electric car? And then how did you decide which car to buy?
Yeah, thanks. So I'm a faculty member at Portland State University, and I used to be at Arizona State University. And at both places, I've been involved with the sustainability programs of the universities. So when I was in Arizona, I felt somewhat of a professional obligation to be trying to get, using less carbon. And so we got an early Prius, which was not an electric, it was a hybrid, as JR talked about before. And then when Prius came out, when they came out with the plug-in Priuses, we got one of those in 2011. We also had the first hybrid Lexus SUV back in 2006. And the plug-in Prius was pretty disappointing because it had a range of about 11 miles. And every time you would go downhill, it would switch to gas because it was getting overcharged. And I thought, well, this is ridiculous. So we traded that in for a Nissan Leaf in about 2013. We had that for a number of years. And then when Donald Trump got elected, I got a part-time job in Canada at University of British Columbia. And initially I was flying from Portland to Vancouver, but then when COVID hit, wasn't going to do that anymore. So we ended up trading in the Leaf for a Tesla because I wanted an electric vehicle that could get the range to get us up to Canada with, I mean, technically we can do it without charging, but we usually stop once or twice, in part just for the psychology that it's nice to take a break, especially if you get to be my age. There's other reasons to stop along the road. So we've kind of gone through each generation as it's come along. And then so 2 other things. Last year we traded in the hybrid Lexus from 2006 for a RAV4 Prime. And so that one has a 45-mile range on electricity. So for my wife driving around Portland, that does everything she needs. But then if we're going to go down to Ashland, or she took a trip to Colorado, then she could go on gas. At this point, I would rather take the Tesla everywhere and go on a long trip and just plan it out to stop along the way. And I guess the last experience, I'm in Massachusetts on vacation, and I have a rented Hertz car. And so when I got here last Tuesday, all they had a RAV4, not plug in anything, but they said, if you come back in a few days, we'll give you a Tesla. So I'm now, for the first time for me, driving a Hertz Tesla, and it's great. And what's interesting is, if you rent a car, they want you to bring it back fully full of gas. But with an electric car from the rental company, they just want you to bring it back with 10% power, so you can drive it all the way down. So in terms of which one to get, maybe that history kind of gives you a sense that if it was just for around town, a good plug-in would be great. I'll also say that we got both the Tesla and the RAV4 fairly early in their availability, which meant we could get them quickly. Within a few months of both of those purchases, it was going to take 6 months to get either of them. So there are some advantages to being an early adopter. And also we got the rebates, which we wouldn't have gotten if we had waited.
Great. Thanks so much, John.
Yeah.
Gianna, what about you? Why did you guys decide to get an electric car?
Thanks, Celeste. And it's so nice to be here and seeing all the other presenters as well. I think, two main reasons. I'm a parent, a mom, and I have two kids. And I think about their lungs and I think about their futures. So both of my kids went to a great preschool, but very close to I-84. And I know that there was a lot more traffic pollution exposure for those little lungs than I would have preferred. I'm also a bike commuter most days. And so getting stuck behind that tailpipe that you prefer not to get stuck behind has that kind of immediate impact as well. And then I'm also a climate professional. And so I know where there's opportunities to decrease our environmental impact. I also care about waterways. There's a number of days, right, where it's rainy and you see those oil slicks from internal combustion engines, and you think about what happens downstream to both food and wildlife impacts. But we also got an electric vehicle earlier this year, in part because Priuses and other vehicles have been targeted for catalytic converter thefts. And we have been seeing them all around our neighborhood. And it just sort of felt like it was a matter of time as well. And we like that, there are fewer moving parts in an electric vehicle. They're easier to maintain. We had a Prius, which we loved for many years, but a lot of things kind of aligned. And we have two kids. So when we were looking for an electric vehicle, we were thinking about range. We were thinking about trunk space, because I don't know if anyone else has tried to haul around strollers and bikes and endless amounts of snacks. And we ended up getting the Ioniq 5, and it has been an incredible vehicle. It's about over 300-mile range in town, and then on the highway, it's probably about 240, 250, depending on how many hills and what speed you're at. And we've had great experience. We've mostly just been road tripping this summer and have had great stops, again, to just charge. And at the fast charging stations, it's about a 20, 25-minute stop, enough time to get out, find another snack, use the restroom with little kids. And it's been a great experience.
Awesome. And then how do you charge your cars at home? JR, you had mentioned that you installed a level 2 charger in your home. Is that right?
Yes. So when my wife ordered her Tesla, we were redoing our garage. So I took the opportunity to run a 240 volt plug. It's basically like a dryer outlet plug in the garage. And then we just used the charger that came with her car. You just had to get a different adapter. I think it was like $100 or maybe even less, $35 adapter to plug it in. She gets probably 30 to 40 miles range per hour, which is more than enough. And then for my car, like I said, it's a smaller battery, so I just used the 110 outlet. So just a regular plug.
How about you, John?
When we got the Leaf, it came with a free charger from Nissan, but you had to get it installed. And I think we paid about $500 to the electrician to get it installed. And then, so in Vancouver, we're in an apartment. So we're still spending time in Canada. And that's, as I mentioned in the chat, it's a real challenge, I think, for people who live in apartments to figure out what you're going to do for charging at home. Where we are, there's a 110 outlet, which will work for the Tesla if you're not in a hurry. And I don't drive very much when I'm up there, so it kind of works. But we were in a different apartment in Vancouver last year, and they were trying to get a couple of level 2s installed. And the way the homeowner associations work in some of these condos and apartments, one person can block it. And so it became very contentious. And I think that's going to be a real challenge going forward for people who can't install like you can in a garage. There's also the comment from Kate in saying, well, this still seems like a pretty high-end option to get these EVs and plugins, and I think that's still true. But Volkswagen and Tesla and others are committed to getting lower cost versions out. And then as several of you have said, if you look at what the maintenance costs are as well, it does level out to be a reasonable option, especially if you get a used EV.
Yes.
It can be quite affordable.
That was my point. I bought a pre-owned BMW i3. It was probably a $46,000, $50,000 car, brand new. I think I got it for about $20,000, and that's mainly because of inflation. It should have been less than that, but it was still less than what I was paying on gas for my truck. So it just made sense for me to do it. You can, like as Pramod said, you can totally buy pre-owned EVs for anywhere from $8,000 to $15,000 to $20,000 and all the way up. So I wouldn't say I'd say it's available now for pretty much mostly anyone, depending on the type of range you need.
Yeah, speaking of range, a lot of people are nervous about being able to get to where they want and need to go. What has your experience been like? Are you able to find charging stations when you need them? Jana?
Yes, so I just did a camping trip, our first electric vehicle camping trip out on the Olympic Peninsula. So, it's over a 4-hour trip, some windy roads. But our car actually came with 2 years of free charging with the Electrify America network. And so that's pretty good up and down the I-5 corridor. But we're also happy to see that in the little town of Aberdeen, which is, more of an old logging town, they have chargers there. And then when we got to our campsite, there was a small little lodge nearby that also had stations available, and actually for free. And so there's more and more that's out there. We use the PlugShare app to find charging stations, and there's quite a lot that's available. Most recently, we also traveled up to Anacortes, where my parents live, and we were able to, our car comes with a little adapter, and so they have an outlet on the outside of their house, and so we were able to just do a little bit of trickle charging overnight, and that gave us a little boost along the way. So it's really feasible. I will admit, right, again, traveling with 2 kids, I don't want to get stranded anywhere, but it's been a lot smoother than even I anticipated.
John, anything to add?
No, I think 300-mile range on the new EVs, that's really adequate for just about anything. And I mean, even with the kind of trip you're describing, Jana, if you do a little bit of planning ahead of time, you can figure it out. Rivian, which is one of the new EV makes, they're planning to have a whole network out at national parks and state parks, because they're marketing themselves to be for outdoorsy people, sort of like Subarus, if Subaru had an all electric. I would just add that the point that Celeste made at the beginning that's really worth emphasizing is these are really fun cars to drive. I mean, I've never been a car person before getting the Tesla, and I really like driving from Portland to Vancouver now, and I used to dread it.
And I myself, I have a plug-in hybrid. And one of the reasons I got a plug-in hybrid and not a fully electric car is because I was living in multifamily housing and I didn't have a place that I could regularly charge a car. And I was just nervous about having to charge my car from my condo to across the sidewalk onto my street parking. So the plug-in hybrid has been a really good good purchase for us. And it has really, we mostly don't use gas because most of my driving is in city, like picking up my kids, dropping them off at summer camp, and commuting to work. So I do think it is an option to consider because you can kind of, even though you're not fully breaking away from fossil fuels, which is the ultimate goal, it's a way for you to like, it's like a step forward. And it can be more practical for some people depending on your living situation. So, and I think David also had a similar point that, you know, you can really get the range that you need if you're willing to continue using gas. So, all right. And then Sandy is wondering, and maybe JR Preowned can answer this one, but what are some companies or dealers who sell pre-owned electric vehicles that would be worth looking into?
Yeah, so companies or dealers who sell I'd say Platt Auto. I think I can put their website in right now, actually. So they are based in Milwaukee, so like Southeast Portland, and they claim to have the largest selection of used electric vehicles on the West Coast. Even if you don't buy from them, I think going there to take test drives and just to talk to the salesman, they're a great resource. They've been doing this for a long time, and with the Oregon rebates, they're great at applying for those and handling all that paperwork for you. And I was going to say, I had a charging sort of story. My first day of working at Fourth, I had never driven an electric vehicle before, been in one, and I basically got the keys of a Volkswagen ID4 handed to me, and I was like, I had to drive 7 hours across Oregon to Wallowa to do an event, and I'd never charged or done anything. So like that one trip single-handedly like destroyed any conception of like range anxiety for me, because like I immediately figured out like, wow, like an electric vehicle just took me 7 hours and I charged like a few times. And the ID4, it gets free charging at Electrify America for 3 years. So essentially I like made it all the way there spending zero money. I mean, of course, it's like, it's an expensive car, so that's a total reality, but like the fuel costs were zero and it like blew my mind. So that's my charging story. And I've had a lot of experience with that car and other cars through our programs. And I can say like, even like, yeah, like the ID4 is like 40K and it's really fun to drive, but even a Leaf, like an older Leaf, is still really, from just like what Celeste was saying about like the fun factor, it's still a very zippy car and it like turns really well and accelerates pretty fast on the highway. And it surprises you for what it looks like. Like they have a lot of power. So yeah, and I put my email in the chat. I was answering Kate's question about, you know, just how much they cost. And that's something that I've had to do a lot of thinking about because I really want to make my next car an EV, and I'm trying to figure out like how I can do that as soon as possible. And I've had some great conversations with a lot of people about, you know, yes, the monthly payment for the car might come out like a little high, and you're like, oh man, it's like $100 or $200 over my budget. But then when you do the side-by-side comparison of like all the costs that are associated with your combustion vehicle or what you're paying for now, then yeah, it makes sense then. So yeah, and JR had a great point about Platt Auto. JR, do you want to add any other places that are good for looking for EVs?
Yeah, I would say, you know, after buying my wife's Tesla, which was like the most incredible, and John, you probably can relate to this, it was probably the most incredible vehicle purchase I've ever done. Like we test drove, I came in, I said, what color do you want? And then like 5 minutes later, we were driving home and we were just, you know, we were waiting for the car to be built and they just send me a message on the app. So I was like, I want to repeat that over and over. Like that was amazing. So if you don't do a in-store place, Platt Auto is great. I really like them. But if you want like an online, which is very 2022, right? You want like a very modern experience, try Carvana, there's one called Vroom, VROOM. We'll put these links up for you. I actually worked with a guy at Tesla who started a company called Current Automotive, CURRENT Automotive, and they sell only electric vehicles or plug-in. I think they do have a couple plug-in hybrids, but mostly it's like 99% electric vehicles. So yeah, a lot of good options today. You don't have to deal with the stress of dealing with a dealer anymore and negotiating and all that stuff like that. Those days are hopefully going out the door.
Yeah, I can add that like Ford is switching all their electric vehicles to 100% online fixed price sales with delivery to your home. And that's something that they feel like will save them a lot of money. I think it will. And of course, like Fourth, we're brand neutral. I have lots of lots of criticisms about lots of EVs, but I will plug that like Chevy dropped prices by 20% for their new model, their 2023 model. So they have the Chevy Bolt, which is like a smaller sort of like Fiat, a little bigger than like a Fiat. It's quite bigger. And then there's a Bolt EUV, which is like an even bigger version. But they're starting at 25 and 28. And with the Oregon rebates, that gets even lower. So like there are companies like Celeste and John were saying that are committing to lowering their prices and getting more entry level models into the market. So yeah, if you're looking for like a lower end model, I'd say that like a Chevy, like we have a coworker here at Fourth who drives a Bolt, and he drove Uber and rideshare in it, and it was his livelihood. So he knows better than anyone else. He endorses it as the EV of the working class, and he knows better than anyone. So yeah, definitely check out the Bolt if you're looking towards that.
Great.
Hey,
Thanks.
Celeste, I just wanted to mention too that our first experience with a plug-in was actually through a car sharing program, Turo. We were traveling, and so we were able to try out someone else's car and get a little hands-on experience, and then feel like we also had kind of lower impact travel when we were away from home. So that might be another good option for folks to get to try out cars.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah,
That
but
was
you
a
should
good
be aware, right? If you get behind the wheel of an EV, you'll probably buy one. So just a fair
Yes.
warning.
Yes.
All right, we only have a couple minutes left here. So I just wanted to ask our EV owners just one final question, which is, what advice do you have for people who are thinking about buying an electric car? John, any advice?
I would echo what Jana said for what her motivations were for getting it. If you live in Oregon or you live in the Pacific Northwest or California, and you're in a place that's trying to be progressive environmentally, this is one of the steps you can take. You know, we can't individually change the power grid or the power structure or whatever, but you can, if you can afford to do it, it's worth doing that. And then you feel like when you're driving, you're not making the world worse for your kids and your grandkids.
Any
I'd
advice,
say,
Jana? Yeah.
yeah, reach out, talk to people, and drop maybe your preconceived notions. Like there are so many more models available today. Utilities are providing incentives for home charging. There's a lot of options. So the whole kind of ecosystem around EV ownership and rentals is really changing every day, and there's more and more available. So jump in.
Okay, I have one thing to say. So
Okay.
remember I told you I paid $118 to fill up my truck a couple months ago, when I probably have driven it once since then. I took my son to Target. I had about 40% battery. We went in the store, we bought one or two things, came out 15 minutes later, I had 85%. It was a $5 charge. And they didn't even charge me. A lot of times you'll get free charges when you go to these charging centers. The cost difference is insane. So it's on top of everything else everyone's saying, speed. Right now, there's a lot of pain with the gas rates the way they are. It's hard to find yourself going to the gas station. It's immeasurable. Well, you can measure it, but it's not.
Well, thank you so much. And that'll have to be our final word. We are at the top of the hour. Thank you so much to all of you for joining and presenting. And thank you to everybody for attending. I will send out a recording so you can review the materials. We'll also send out JR and Pramod's slides and the more information about the rebates, since I think that part was just a little bit confusing for folks. So we'll make sure to clear all of that up. And hopefully you'll get out there and test drive some electric vehicles, and please let us know what you think. But thank you all so much for coming, and have a good rest of your day.